Encounter is brought to you by the Broome County Council of Churches, where we connect compassion with needs as we inspire growth with dignity. You'll find us in special places throughout the community. For those who remain hungry, we provide meals. For those who are challenged, we build wheelchair ramps. We comfort those who are ill, minister to those who are confined, and we remain an advocate for change and understanding on behalf of every element of our community. Connect and inspire. Encounter the Broome County Council of Churches.
Good morning and welcome to Encounter. I'm your host today. My name is Joe Sellepack. I'm the Executive Director at the Broome County Council of Churches. 3 years ago, my father died. And this was after a very tragic part in my family's history where my nephew died, who's 18 years old as well. And I can remember this all happened in August, but you know, it almost felt like a slide into Christmas. There was very little time between. It felt like there was very little time between the deaths and when my family gathered for Christmas. And I remember walking through a grocery store, listening to all the Christmas music that was going on and all the joy that was around me. And I saw so many people that were, you know, getting ready for Christmas parties and those kinds of things. I felt a real disconnect between my own internal feelings that I was having at that time and the merrymaking that was going on all around me. And I felt like I was walking in a fog. Am I alone in that feeling?
You are not alone in that. So many people have such a hard time this part of the year, this season, especially with all the holly jolly stuff going on. People are wrecked from all sorts of situations in their lives, and to go through Christmas is hard.
My guest today is Michelle Bogue-Trost from Central United Methodist Church. She's the pastor there, Reverend Dr. Michelle Bogue-Trost. It's nice to have you on Encounter today.
It's good to be here.
So, we often feel as if we're walking out in a fog, like we're not really connecting with the merrymaking that's going around. And some therapists actually say that that's one of the reasons why alcohol sales skyrocket at this time of year, because people just don't know how to handle grief and loss.
High incidences of depression and suicide as well.
Yeah.
At this time of year particularly.
So let's talk a little bit about your church before we get into the subject matter. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about Central United Methodist Church.
Central Church is central to the town of Union. We're right in the middle of the town of Union on Main Street, Nanticoke, and near Main Street in Endicott. Most people know us as being across from the cider mill. That's that church. Very active church in ministry. We have a clothing center that gives out clothing 3 days a week. We have a free community supper every Thursday night. We've got folks who are very committed to being open to the community and serving the community in the world.
That's important to be a servant of the world at this point of time, too, I would imagine.
It is.
Yeah, so last Sunday you all had a special worship service. You want to tell us a bit about that, too?
Last Sunday evening we had what we call at Central a Blue Christmas service. It's a worship opportunity that more and more churches are providing for folks who feel like you felt when your father died. That Christmas is just too much to handle, that being around happy people is just too much to bear, that the expectations of Christmas are just too much to carry. And the sense of it for churches who offer this kind of service is that none of that is the point of the season. The point of the season is to recognize that God is with us, that God has come in flesh and in time to be with us. And this God knows our pains and our hurts and our fears and all of the things that plague us. And that's what we celebrate at Christmas, is this coming of God into the world. And so how can we offer Christmas in an authentic way to folks who just can't do the ho 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 and fa la la?
Yeah, that's a really great line right there. So what is it about our expectations of Christmas? Like what do we expect out of it that
Perfection. We expect perfection. Every Christmas we expect it's going to be the perfect Christmas. We're going to have all the decorations up and absolutely perfect. We're going to have all the lights properly placed on our houses. We're going to have them synchronized to the music. We're going to have just the right amount of gifts for everyone in our family and just the perfect gift for each one, impeccably wrapped. Pinterest doesn't help because everybody's perfect on Pinterest. So we have these ramped up expectations of ourselves and of other people at the holiday time that are just impossible to meet.
So it's really not realistic.
It isn't. It's fun to jump into that and to hope we can get there and to have fun trying. But really, the expectation of perfection at this time of year is really high.
Where do you think that comes from?
Oh. I don't even want to speculate. I think we're enculturated into expecting bigger and better and bigger and better every single year and better than last year, and everything's got to be better than it was before.
And it's hard for us to lay down our desires or our expectations over things. So we want to have like a like you had said, we want an impeccable Christmas where everything goes according to plan. But oftentimes our Christmas celebration looks more like the Chevy Chase version of it, right? Where
Chevy Chase, Christmas with a Crank, or Charlie Brown's Christmas with the poor little tree.
Poor little tree.
And then we get disappointed when it doesn't come off the way we have imagined it should.
But yet still somehow in the midst of all of that, I can still I'll just reflect on my own family when we share the stories of my father and my nephew. Not that first year, now it's becoming a little bit less acute, but the more we talk about them, the more we talk about Christmas. Like my dad's big thing was the nativity set. He would always bring it out on Christmas Eve, and we would read the Christmas story, and we would bring out all the characters as the story went on.
Sure.
And then the gifts would go around the nativity. So we were like the wise men who would bring the gifts and it would go around the nativity. And that became, we can tell that story now, and it doesn't feel as if we've lost it. We still do it. It's still part of the family tradition. But but now we've been able to incorporate it. But I'll tell you what, that first year, I didn't want to look at that nativity set.
Probably didn't even want to pull it out.
Nope, not at all. And part of that was just that the acuteness of that loss, and the church doesn't really walk with people through grief as well as it should, does it?
Not as well as we could.
Yeah.
I think on the whole, grief is such, especially in our American culture, grief is such a hard thing to wrap ourselves around because we're supposed to handle everything well and be extremely well-adjusted people, and
you will work through all those stages.
Absolutely.
I've gotten through anger.
Right.
Now I can finally be myself, right?
Right. And I know in my own experience in all these years of ministry is that folks when they're feeling grief and loss, they tend to pull back into themselves, and very often I find that people disappear from church at that point in their lives. I just can't be around a place that's always been happy for me, or where I perceive everybody to be happier and better spiritually than I am. I just can't be there right now. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard that. I just can't be at church right now. I don't feel well enough to be there.
It would surprise everyone to know that the Reverend Dr. Joe Sellepack, after my father died, I couldn't be in a church and sing hymns.
Right.
It was one of the hardest things that I had to actually do, was learn to sing hymns over again, because especially the high anthems, where you're walking through a procession and the choir is in full blown, and it feels like Easter is Easter's happening, when in reality I was still walking in the shadow of death. And so for me, I had to. We attended a red service at the Episcopal Church where there was no music, and it was just the liturgy and the readings, and then a sermon, and then communion, and that was basically for me church for a long period of time.
Which was right for you in that moment in your life.
Yeah.
And we've packaged up Christianity to be this feel-good kind of thing, and we forget the message that that God is with us even in our deepest, darkest times.
Well, and that's what Emmanuel means, right? So
God with us.
God with us. And Jesus, if he's going to take on flesh and blood and be with us in our life, he's got to walk through us with grief. I mean,
yes.
They talk about that short verse where Jesus is by Lazarus's tomb and
weeps.
He weeps. Jesus wept. Very, very short, succinct verse.
And there's so much liturgy available as well that he knew our griefs. He wept our tears. There's so much liturgy available and so many prayers and resources available in the church, but we tend to go with the happy stuff.
Yeah. So in your worship service that you did, what was the feeling of the service? Did it bring people into a place where they could accept their grief?
I think so. This service was developed by a layperson in our church before I was appointed there, in a way to help, as a way for folks to come to a place and deal with whatever it was they're feeling, the feelings of loss. Loss is not just about losing a loved one.
Right.
We lose relationships, we lose jobs, we lose health, we lose independence, whatever we've lost. And so this service is a way for folks to say, I have lost something.
Right.
I have lost something, and it's wrecking me inside, and I need God in this moment. And so we light candles of remembrance for things that are lost, for people who have been lost, or love that has been lost, or a security that's been lost. We light a candle and describe the kinds of losses. We give people a ribbon to lay on the altar, or in our case on the communion rail, as a token of that which they're grieving, to let it go, to leave it at the altar. And we offer anointing oil for healing. Is there a way in which we can anoint these wounds, put salve on these wounds for you, and let you know that God is with you? God is with us all. And so it's carefully chosen hymns, and there are some beautiful Christmas hymns.
Oh, there are.
That are about the presence of God through it all with us.
Right.
That we don't use often enough.
That's true. Let all mortal flesh keep silence.
That was one we had.
That's a provocative hymn for me.
Is.
Every time I sing it, or every time I read the words in it, there's another layer. So many deep layers there to that hymn.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit more about the Christmas season and Christmas expectations. So we go out and we want to have happy children, so they come back to us with a list of things that Santa Claus is supposed to bring them.
Yes.
Now, if you've gone through this service of loss, it may actually empower you to be able to say to your children at some point, no, we can't afford that.
Yes.
Because the more we try to live up to the expectations of Christmas, oftentimes the more deeply we dig our hole.
Yes, and then it's harder
to
climb out of after the season, after the post-Christmas crash. How do you climb back out of that when you've laid all of that on yourself on top of what you're already going through?
And so that it becomes less about Emmanuel being with us. It's more about the expectation of the expectation of Emmanuel that's going to be born as a little baby, and we don't remember, like as Luther said, that baby came very much dependent on us. You know, the Nativity was a dirty place, you know, and it was full of dashed dreams and expectations too.
Right.
I mean,
Right. Well, you know, the whole story starts with a move of Roman power
right,
to an oppressed people.
right,
The need for the travel, the need for the stable, is not about a Christmas vacation.
right.
It's about Rome saying, "You will do this."
And we really don't know how long they had to stay there in that place, but they were forced. It was a forced occupation. So in that kind of a way, you know, as soon as you start reading about, you know, thinking about how the Christmas story is shaped, I keep remembering an icon actually from the Eastern tradition where there's the cradle comes into what looks like a tomb. So you have this this cave-like place where Jesus is born, and it connects the birth with the death, you know, in that
Yes.
kind of a way, and in that too, you know, you have the expectations of what a Messiah would be perhaps from the first century context, and you know, a lot of things were laid on that Messiah, and so the disconnect is right there in the story itself. So we have the expectations of the people around it, you know, all the hopes and fears of all the years. You know, how does that chorus go? You know, and are found in Him tonight. And but yet the hopes and fears aren't met. You know, they're you know, there's a.
We still have all those hopes
We
and
do.
fears. We still have all those hopes and fears. We still have all those needs. We still have all the deep desire of our hearts. We still have all the needs of a world that has not yet seen justice for all, that still oppresses people, that still kills people for power and might and greed, that still pollutes. You know, none of that has been solved yet.
Right.
We still have all those needs.
And so how does that so on, like last Sunday,